Welcome in, folks. I'm Chris Temple, editor of the National Investor. And again, today wearing another hat is one of the instigators, if you will, of the upcoming Strategic Investment Insights 2022 conference in Chicago. As you see on the screen here, you can go to the website and register. Make sure you read our terms of use also. But this is going to be, I think, the most exciting conference in the history of this show, which, as you've heard on prior discussions, we've rebranded to reflect the new world in which we're in. It's a world in which we're going to see a multipolar world emerge. There's going to be increasing conflicts over currencies, over commodities, commodity supplies, and so forth. And it really creates a great situation for our returning guest here, my old friend Jim Paterson, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Valore Metals. And as we start, also the co-founder and principal of a group called the Discovery Group, which has to be feeling really good about life these days, Jim, with this likely secular bull market in commodities across the board we have again.
Great. Yeah, we've had several rough years when the market conditions were going against us. They're really at the winds at our back right now, and we've had some M&A success. A lot of the companies in our group are having lots of success raising capital to advance their projects, whether that is because of jurisdictional risks that are affecting commodity prices or just interest in those particular commodities. It seems like it's going well.
Yeah, that's great. Now, the most recent success that Discovery Group had, of course, was on Great Bear Resources. Give us a quick snapshot of that for people who need a refresher or didn't know about this story.
Well, Great Bear is the quintessential reason why people invest in gold stocks. And when that company joined Discovery Group, it had a market cap of, I think, less than $1 million Canadian. They had some projects in Western Canada, and then they had this project in Ontario called Dixie, which they were trying to convince investors that the previous exploration groups had looked at it through a lens that wasn't a very effective lens, and they needed to kind of start looking at it in a different way. And they were very convincing. Bob Singh and Chris Taylor told the story in a way that it resonated with us, and we were quite excited to work with them. So they joined our group. We were able to help them with a few introductions to board members, and then help them raise a bit of money. And then that team and the project took it from there. I can't take any real credit for the success. It's really that team that did it. But it was, as I said, $1 million Canadian was the market cap, including cash, some cash. And they just were acquired by Kinross for $1.8 billion a couple of months ago. So that was a rocket ship ride.
Yeah,
I think it made a lot of people a lot of money, and I think it just kind of affirmed or reaffirmed why you invest in companies that are spending money on exploration, spending money on potential growth.
Well, and more important, being associated with a group like yours, which can keep these projects alive during those lean years for resources, and I'll second what you just said too. I've seen a lot of companies recently that have got good projects, good stories, not any of these fly-by-night things, not any of these lifestyle companies, but legitimate projects. It's not all that difficult to raise money now because a light bulb is starting to go off over more and more investors' heads, investors of all shapes and sizes, that this secular bull market for commodities, for security reasons, strategic reasons, all these things is really the up and coming story. So let's shift to Valore specifically. And of course, you're going to be telling us a lot more about Valore in Chicago with Strategic Investment Insights. But when you and I first met way over a decade ago, Valore was chiefly a uranium exploration company. You've dabbled in a couple other things, one of which is an exciting platinum group metals and base metal, I think, also project in Brazil, which we'll touch on a bit later. But now with the uranium market having taken off, a lot of uranium stocks have been doing hamstrings, and I think it's just the beginning. Now you're focusing on that again. You already had in Nunavut with the Angelac project, the largest and highest grade resource outside of the Athabasca Basin. And now you're really going to hit it hard again this year with more exploration. So give us an overview of what Angelac has been and then this year's exploration.
Yeah, and I'll just make a correction. It's not the largest resource outside the Athabasca. It's the highest grade.
Highest grade, I'm sorry.
And there's room that we could really grow it, but grades are obviously really important because
Right.
that's you get paid based upon the minerals that you're extracting, processing, and selling. So the higher grade, the less rock you got to move to get paid. So it's a big important factor in mineral exploration and mining. And you're right, we did meet. We actually met in Chicago. Is where we met at the conference that Eric and his dad were putting on for many years. And at the time we were called Kivalliq Energy Corporation, and we had the Angelac property, which is the uranium project. It's a large land package on a basin in Nunavut territory. Previous operators had spent a bunch of money on it, and they had identified where a zone of mineralization was, but they actually didn't have any kind of location points. It was just written about in an annual report in the 80s. And we went in and did our own version of CSI Nunavut to determine where the mineralization was. We did a series of drill holes in the early stages, and we were successful. And from there, we were able to raise significant amount of capital and drill off a 43 million pound resource. So we've spent over $55 million in that project, which would include a lot of kind of regional exploration, but also highly focused drilling on the resource zones. And we did metallurgy, and we did a lot of releases on that in 2013 and earlier, which is pretty rare. So in the uranium sector right now for Canadian explorers, if you look at the exploration companies that actually have a resource basis, so they've went through all the failure and money spending to drill off a resource, we're actually a rarity. And then those companies that actually have a resource base that are classed as explorers that have done metallurgy, the numbers are very low, so only a couple. So all these companies are positioning themselves as uranium companies for the most part in Saskatchewan, and they're getting some big market capitalization values. And we were really kind of focused on other projects, so we weren't promoting ourselves as a uranium company, and now we are again. And so I'm pretty excited. We raised enough money at the end of the calendar 2021 to have at least an $11 million program on the project. And the drill rigs starting this week. So they'll be drilling starting this week. So the reports from the field, I hope, will be very exciting. One of the things about uranium exploration is you don't actually have to wait until you get the assays back to determine whether you've hit a zone of radioactivity, because you have scintillometers that squeal like pigs. When basically they click and they squeal when you hit something that's radioactive. In our case, it could either be thorium or uranium, but in our case, there's really no kind of prevalence of thorium on our project, so it's going to be uranium. So if we're in the right place, we'll know it right away. So anyways, the rigs are turning. The RC rig is turning this week, weather permitting.
Nice. And this week, meaning we're just down to the week after Easter.
Okay, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Right. Now, as we go forward, and of course, we're going to talk a lot more about Valore specifically, the uranium sector generally on the energy panel in Chicago. But a lot has changed. There's moves afoot in the Congress here in the U.S. to cut off all imports of Russia and Russia allied uranium. There's been funding initially, though that not a penny of it as of now has been released for a domestic uranium reserve here. What can you tell us quickly, Jim, if anything, really on the subject about how you see the evolution of an advancing exploration asset and potential new future reserve of uranium in Canada, when both countries are under increasing pressure to put together the pieces to make sure that we have a uranium market and supply our needs within our own four walls, so that someday we don't have to worry about other countries again.
Well, I think that in terms of the US market anyways, it still has the largest fleet of reactors in the world. So roughly 100 reactors. So it's a very important market. I think he really didn't have any public or political support for nuclear, even though in my mind it is the best way to distribute energy to large population bases and base load power. And it just got it was like the Rodney Dangerfield of energy, but it's super important. And now in Europe, there are obviously differing views, but I think that they're kind of getting their heads around the importance of it. The Chinese definitely know how important reactors are. I mean, I was back in 2012, and I think they had less than 20 reactors They're getting close to 50 now. And so they're building more reactors than we can even comprehend. And the beautiful thing about a reactor, which I think your audience would know, is that one standard gigawatt reactor consumes between 400,000 and 500,000 pounds of U3O8 on an annual basis. And reactors usually stick around for 50 to 60 years. So once you turn it on, you must feed that beast at least 400,000 pounds of U3O8 every year for 50, 60 years. So it's a big deal when a new reactor gets put in place. And a lot of new reactors are getting built in Asia, specifically China, and Europe seems to be coming around. And in Canada, the big cities like Toronto, well, Toronto is mostly it's hydroelectric and nuclear that powers one of the biggest cities in North America, which is Toronto. So, I think that, the times are looking pretty good. The scarcity angle is what really a speculator, an investor in a company like ours will really benefit from, because, as the big fuel buyers for the reactors start to really determine that they have to start contracting, the producers are not going to be selling it at a discounted price. They're going to be hammering a higher price, which will kind of create excitement in the spot market. And the big deal right now is the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, which I'm sure you've covered, and you have covered a lot, Chris. But they're the one group that's kind of keeping the secondary supply honest, because when we first started in the business, it was really hard to understand where the secondary supply was going to come from or where it came from. So you'd have this constant selling of or reemergence of supply, and no one knew where it came from. Now with the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, if there's ever an offer, if there's ever somebody trying to sell a product, they just buy it. They just take it and they store it and put it away. And so the price is moving. The price is going to move a lot more. And when the price of spot uranium moves up, the junior explorers get a big volatile kick up as well. And so we've already seen it to be beginning right now with the market caps really moving up with all the junior explorers. The capital's there. And I think we're just sort of in the very early innings, I'd say 2 or 3 of an inning of a baseball game that might go into, extended innings as well.
Yeah. Well, I want to add one thing before we go on to your other major asset, Jim, that's really intriguing. And that is, for those that follow the resource markets, if you go back 10 or 11 years ago, when you had a peak both in the precious metals and specifically gold stocks, and then a peak in uranium because of the Fukushima disaster, and the whole sector collapsed until we've had this renaissance in the last year and a half or 2 years. Most of the gold-oriented companies are still around. There's just a truckload of them out there. But a lot of the uranium companies did not survive. There's a fraction of the number of uranium plays out there right now that there is compared to 10, 11 years ago when the market had its last major peak. And so there's not a lot of places for investors to go when this story starts to resonate. So, we've already, the uranium stocks altogether, including Valore, which of course is one of my recommendations, have been the biggest sector weighting in my newsletter for a while right now. And I've been reticent about taking too much profits, because when this thing really takes off, when the light bulb really goes off over people's heads, there's going to be some crazy moves, I think, at some of these prices. So you're obviously in the right place, and I'm excited for the program that you've got to explore more at Angelac and hopefully add to that 43 million pounds. But as we close, tell us about Pedra Branca. This is a project you acquired more recently in Brazil. I've been following the news. It's a really sexy story of platinum, palladium, some base metals, and you're trying to figure out what to do with that and where to focus. You did announce and tell us about this as well, Jim, that you're kind of doing a strategic review to figure out if maybe there's, maybe you should sell that to somebody or JV it and focus, really hit uranium hard to the extent you can. Give us your thoughts, but an overview too on Pedra Branca.
Yeah, we bought this project in 2019. We spent roughly between 3 million cash and 6.5 million Canadian in stock. We spent about 9.5 million Canadian to buy what we determined was about 1.1 million ounces of palladium and platinum and some gold. And then we spent 2019 trying to figure out all the data that the previous operators had. We organized that and we drilled it in 2020 and 2021. And we just released that we'd actually doubled that resource. And we spent about 6.1 million Canadian to do that. So That's less than $6 per ounce added. It's great value. There's huge upside. We think we have a team down there, sort of second to none in terms of Brazilian discovery groups, exploration teams. And we've shown that we can double the resource, and they've got an exploration methodology that we think we can find a lot more. So we think that's very attractive to groups that might have a project that is sort of in that boring permitting engineering phase. And they might kind of be complementary assets with ours, which of course we have the resource base, but we've got a lot of growth potential, lots of news flow that might counteract those sleepy permitting timeframes when you've got a great project that you're kind of in at the mercy of the government to tell you whether it's moving forward or not. So anyway, those are good. That's one example of a group that we might be able to do a deal with. I don't think we're just going to go and sell it. I think we're going to find some way to collaborate with some other groups to help them with their project, and they can help us with ours, and figure out some sort of entity that would best serve our shareholder base. And then that would create a pure play uranium company in the form of Anglag,
right,
or the holding of Anglag. And we've got bankers that are incentivized to maximize value, not only for the Pedro Branco project, but for the uranium project. So that it could include big financings or some sort of deal in Canada where you have a complementary asset. But that's for time to tell, and the bankers to try to convince us that that's the right idea. But either way, in both cases, we're barreling forward. We're trying to find more mineralization, add value, have news releases. We're not going to enter into some sort of quiet period. We're going to be actually the opposite. And I've been told that a moving target is much more attractive. So we're moving fast.
for sure. Well, and you've got two killer assets, and even after a decent share price performance recently, as more people are coming in, what as we're recording this today, your market cap is what again? Remind us.
It's around 75 million Canadian.
Okay, I'm certainly up from when everything was in the dumps among junior resources, but for two major assets like this, that's still a pittance. So folks, take a look at Valore Metals. More important, again, come to our conference in Chicago. You can go to the website and register. There's still room. If for some reason you can't physically be there, make sure you register on the site anyway, because that will give you access to all of the profiles of all of our companies, including Valore, our two big panel discussions, and more. So Jim, I'm looking forward to seeing you up there. Not many days hence. It's going to be fun, and these are exciting times for these kinds of companies such as yours. Thanks much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.